The desperate core, the crystalline spires of Zalathia, had stood for 3,000 years, their translucent surfaces reflecting the twin suns of the Zalani homeworld, in patterns that once brought peace to all who gazed upon them. Now they burned. Dr. Lysa Tiaran pressed her six-fingered hands against the observation deck's viewport, watching as another spire crumbled under the relentless bombardment from above. The Corthax warships hung in orbit like metallic vultures, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had already reduced half the capital city to glowing slag. The Zalani had always been a peaceful people. Their entire civilization was built on harmony, knowledge, and the gentle cultivation of beauty. They had no armies, no weapons of war, only the philosophical belief that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and compromise. That naive faith was now being tested against the brutal reality of the Corthax Empire, a species that viewed conquest not as a means to an end, but as an art form in itself. Dr. Tiaran called out her assistant, young Kelos, his usually pristine white robes now stained with dust and fear. The Emergency Council is demanding answers. They want to know if the diplomatic channels are still open. Lysa closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her people's extinction pressing down on her shoulders. As the head of xenological communications, she had spent decades studying the various species of the galaxy, cataloguing their languages, their customs, their territories. She knew better than anyone that the Corthax didn't negotiate, they consumed. The Corthax stopped responding to our diplomatic overtures 6 rotations ago, she said quietly. They're not interested in our surrender terms. They're not even interested in our resources. She turned from the viewport, her large, opalescent eyes reflecting the fires outside. This is systematic extermination, Kelos. They're erasing us, because they find our peaceful nature ... offensive. Another explosion rocked the communications center, and several of her colleagues stumbled as the floor trembled beneath their feet. Through the building's smart glass walls, Lysa could see evacuation streams of Zalani fleeing toward the underground shelters. Their graceful, elongated forms moved with desperate urgency, so different from their usual measured, contemplative pace. What about the other civilizations? Kelos asked, his voice cracking with barely contained panic. Surely the Galactic Council will intervene. The Altarian Federation, the Nexus Collective, someone must help us. Lysa shook her head grimly. She had been sending distress calls for days, broadcasting on every known frequency, pleading with anyone who would listen. The responses had been uniformly disappointing. The major galactic powers expressed sympathy, but claimed they were too far away to mount an effective response. The smaller civilizations were too afraid of Corthax retaliation to risk involvement. The galaxy, it seemed, was content to let the Zalani die quietly. There is one option, she said slowly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. One we haven't tried. Klaus moved closer, hope flickering in his eyes. What option? Lysa walked to her workstation, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface with practiced precision. Deep in the archives of xenological data, buried beneath layers of classified information and ancient treaties, lay a frequency that hadn't been used in over 2 centuries. It was marked with warning symbols in 17 different languages, all conveying the same basic message: use only in extreme circumstances. Contact with this species not recommended. The humans, she said, and Kelos physically recoiled as if she had spoken a curse word. Every civilized species in the galaxy knew about humans, though most tried very hard not to think about them. They were the stuff of nightmare stories told to frighten children, the boogeyman lurking at the edge of known space. Humans came from a world so hostile that it had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years, and instead of finding a more hospitable planet, they had simply become better at killing back. They were apex predators, wrapped in the skin of intelligent beings, creatures who had turned warfare into a science and violence into an art form. "Dr. Tehran, you can't be serious," Keller stammered. "The humans are. They're Deathworlders. They're barely more than sophisticated barbarians. The stories about what they did during the Centauri uprising, the way they ended the vegan war, ... He shuddered. They solved problems by eliminating them entirely." "Exactly," Lysa said, her fingers already configuring the ancient transmission array, "which is precisely what we need right now." She began encoding the message, using the old diplomatic protocols that had been established during humanity's brief contact with the greater galactic community. The humans had withdrawn from galactic politics decades ago, claiming they needed time to work on themselves. After several incidents that had left entire star systems traumatized, most civilizations had been relieved by their self-imposed isolation. The message was simple, a distress call identifying the Zalani homeworld, their situation, and a formal request for assistance against hostile forces. What she didn't include was any mention of the Korthak specifically, or the scale of the threat they were facing. She had a feeling that if the humans came at all, they would figure out the details for themselves. As she prepared to transmit, another massive explosion lit up the night sky. One of the great libraries, a repository of knowledge spanning millennia, simply vanished in a pillar of fire. The Korthaks were being thorough, erasing not just Zalani lives, but their culture, their history, their very existence. "Signal ready for transmission," the communication array announced in its calm, synthesized voice. Lysa hesitated for just a moment. Once she sent this message, there would be no taking it back. She would either be saving her people or dooming them to something potentially worse than extinction. The humans had a reputation for many things, but mercy was not among them. Another spire fell, taking with it 1,000 years of architectural achievement and the lives of everyone inside. She pressed the transmission key. The signal burst outward. From Zalathia racing through space at faster than light speeds, carrying with it the desperate plea of a dying civilization. It bypassed the normal diplomatic channels, ignored the established communication networks, and instead followed ancient routes that most species had forgotten existed. It was a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean, with no guarantee that anyone would find it or care if they did. But somewhere in the depths of space, in a region marked on most star charts as unexplored or a void, the signal found its target. Captain Maya Rodriguez was reviewing the monthly patrol reports when her communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, suddenly straightened at her station aboard the human vessel Indomitable. The bridge of the heavy cruiser was a study in controlled chaos, with dozens of crew members monitoring everything from engine performance to quantum flux patterns. Unlike the sterile, pristine environments favored by most galactic civilizations, human ships felt lived in, functional, designed by people who understood that space was trying to kill them and responded accordingly. "Captain," Kim called out, her voice tight with surprise, "I'm picking up something unusual. It's on the old diplomatic frequency, the one we used during the Galactic Council days." Rodriguez looked up from her reports, her dark eyes sharpening with interest. At 42, she was young for a captain, but she had earned her position through a combination of tactical brilliance and the kind of stubborn determination that humans were famous for. Her uniform bore the scars of a dozen conflicts, and her left hand was a prosthetic replacement after an unfortunate encounter with a Regalian boarding party. "The council frequency that hasn't been active in 30 years, she said, standing and walking over to Kim's station. "You sure it's not some kind of automated echo?" "Negative, Captain. This is fresh. Transmitted maybe 6 hours ago. Signal originated from..." Kim's fingers danced over her controls, cross-referencing stellar databases. "Grid reference Alpha 774. That's in the outer rim, Captain. Way outside normal shipping lanes." Rodriguez frowned. The outer rim was largely unexplored, a vast region of space that most civilizations considered too dangerous or unprofitable to bother with. What was out there that would be desperate enough to use humanity's old diplomatic frequency? "Play the message," she ordered. The bridge fell silent as the communication filled the air. The voice was clearly alien, speaking in heavily accented, standard Galactic, but the desperation was universal. As the message played, Rodriguez felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she had gotten during the evacuation of New Manila, when the colony's shields were failing and time was running out. "Unknown sender, this is Dr. Lysa T. of the Zalani Research Institute. Our world is under attack by hostile forces. Our people are dying. We have exhausted all diplomatic options and formal channels of assistance. This is a formal request for aid under the emergency protocols established by the Treaty of Proxima. We are a peaceful people with no military capabilities. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help." The message ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Rodriguez stood motionless for a long moment, processing what she had just heard. The Treaty of Proxima was ancient history, a document signed when humanity was still trying to play nice with the rest of the galaxy. It had been rendered null and void when human involvement in galactic affairs became complicated. "Captain," said her XO, Commander David Park, stepping up beside her. "The Treaty of Proxima was dissolved after the vegan incident. We have no legal obligation to respond." "I know," Rodriguez replied quietly. "Kim, do we have any intel on these Zalani?" The communications officer was already working, pulling up files from the extensive human intelligence network. Despite their isolation, humanity had never stopped watching the galaxy, keeping track of threats and opportunities with the paranoid thoroughness that had kept them alive on their Deathworld home. "Limited data, Captain. The Zalani are listed as a Class 7 peaceful civilization. No military to speak of, focused on science and philosophy. Their homeworld is Zalathia, population approximately 4 billion. They've never been involved in any conflicts, never shown any aggression toward anyone. And the hostiles attacking them..." Kim's expression darkened as she accessed classified files. "Based on the attack pattern and location, most likely the Korthax Empire. They've been expanding aggressively in that sector, absorbing smaller civilizations. The Zalani would be right in their path." Rodriguez had heard of the Korthax. They were one of the few species that actually made humans look restrained by comparison. Where humans fought with purpose and discipline, the Korthax killed for the simple joy of it. They were a plague upon the galaxy, spreading from system to system, leaving nothing but death in their wake. "Captain," Park said carefully, "if we respond to this, we'll be violating about a dozen non-interference treaties. The Galactic Council will have our heads." "The Galactic Council can kiss my arse," Rodriguez replied bluntly. "Kim, patch me through to Fleet Admiral Chen." Within minutes, the main screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of Admiral Chen Wei, commander of the 3rd Human Fleet. Chen was in his 60s, his hair steel grey and his face marked by the kind of lines that came from making hard decisions under impossible circumstances. Behind him, Rodriguez could see the bridge of the massive dreadnought Retribution, humanity's most powerful warship. "Captain Rodriguez," Chen said without preamble, "I assume this is about the distress call." "You've heard it, sir. Every human ship within 50 light-years picked it up. The question is, what do we do about it?" Chen leaned back in his command chair, his expression unreadable. "Officially, we're not supposed to interfere in galactic affairs. Unofficially, ... He paused, and Rodriguez caught a glimpse of something cold and dangerous in his eyes. "Unofficially, I'm getting real tired of watching innocent people die while everyone else wrings their hands and talks about jurisdiction." Rodriguez felt a surge of fierce pride. This was why she served under Chen, why she had followed him through 3 wars and a dozen police actions. He understood what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of predators. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Chen was quiet for a moment, staring at something off-screen. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Assemble Battle Group 7. Full deployment, no restrictions. We're going to show these Korthaks what happens when they pick on someone who can't fight back." He looked directly at Rodriguez through the screen. "Captain, you have operational command. Use whatever force you deem necessary." "Understood, Admiral. What about the Council?" Chun's smile was sharp as a blade. "Let them complain. Maybe it's time they remembered why they asked us to stay away in the first place." When Deathworlders answered the Korthak's warlord, Vextar stood on the command deck of his flagship Blood Throne, watching with satisfaction as another section of the Zalani capital burned below. The view screen showed real-time footage of his ground forces methodically destroying evacuation centers, herding the surviving civilians into collection points for final processing. It was efficient work, the kind of systematic extermination that had made the Korthak's empire the terror of 17 star systems. Vextar was a magnificent specimen of his species, standing nearly 3 meters tall with the characteristic armored hide and razor-sharp claws that marked him as an apex predator. His neural crest flared with bioluminescent patterns that indicated his pleasure at the destruction below. The Zalani had been even easier prey than anticipated, their pacifist nature making them laughably vulnerable to proper military tactics. Warlord called out his tactical officer, Sub-Commander Crix. "We're detecting some unusual energy signatures. In the outer system, long-range sensors are picking up gravity distortions consistent with multiple ship arrivals." Vextar's head turned slightly, his predatory instincts stirring. "How many ships?" "Difficult to determine, sir. The signatures are ... unusual, not matching any known profiles in our database." The warlord felt a flicker of annoyance. The Zalani had been sending distress calls throughout the siege, begging for help from anyone who would listen. So far, the galaxy had shown its typical cowardice, content to let the weak perish rather than risk confronting Korthak's might. But perhaps some foolish civilization had finally decided to play hero. "Probably some merchant vessels," Vextar growled dismissively. "Or perhaps the Altarians have finally grown a spine. Either way, they're too late to save these pathetic creatures." On the planet below, Dr. Lysa Tiaran huddled in the emergency bunker beneath the communications center, surrounded by the few surviving members of her research team. The bunker's walls shook continuously as Korthak's bombardment turned the surface world into a hellscape. They had been trapped here for 2 days, existing on emergency rations and recycled air while listening to the sounds of their civilization. Dying above them, any word from the outer colonies? Asked Kellis, his once pristine appearance now haggard and dust-covered. Nothing, Lysa replied, monitoring her portable communication array. The Korthax have been jamming most frequencies. I can't tell if anyone received our distress calls, or if they're simply choosing not to respond. Another massive explosion rocked the bunker, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The emergency lights flickered ominously, and Lysa realized they probably had less than a day before the Korthax decided to dig them out of their hole. She thought about the message she had sent to the humans and wondered if it had been a mistake. At least with the Korthax, death would be relatively quick. If the humans came, Dr. T, one of her technicians, a young female named Sira, was staring at her instruments with wide eyes. I'm picking up something on the emergency frequencies. Multiple signals, very powerful transmissions. Lysa rushed to the console, her heart's racing. As she saw the readings, someone was broadcasting on military frequencies, using encryption patterns she didn't recognize, but with signal strength that suggested an entire fleet had just arrived in system. Can you decrypt any of it? I'm trying, but the encryption is incredibly sophisticated. Wait, ... Sira's fingers flew over the controls. I'm getting fragments. They're using standard Galactic for coordination, but with heavy accent patterns. The syntax is ... aggressive. Before Lysa could respond, every communication device in the bunker suddenly crackled to life with a single, powerful transmission that cut through the Korthax jamming like it wasn't even there. Attention, all Zilani survivors. This is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force. We have received your distress call and are moving to assist. Take cover and await further instructions. We're here to help. The bunker fell completely silent. Sira looked up at Lysa with a mixture of hope and terror in her eyes. Dr. Tren ... Did she say Terran, as in ... human? Lysa nodded slowly, her mind racing. The humans had come. After all these years of isolation, after all the stories and warnings, they had actually responded to her desperate plea. She wasn't sure if she should feel relieved or horrified. Yes, she whispered. I think we're about to witness something the galaxy hasn't seen in 30 years. Aboard the Blood Throne, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. What had started as routine mop-up operations was rapidly becoming something far more complex. The bridge crew moved with increased urgency as sensor reports flooded in. Warlord Crix's voice had risen to near panic levels. I'm getting accurate readings now. 12 capital ships, at least 30 escorts, all moving at high speed toward our position. Configuration unknown, but the power signatures are ... significant. Vexter straightened to his full height, his neural crest flaring with battle. Finally, someone with enough courage to challenge the Korthax directly. It had been too long since he had faced worthy opponents. Excellent. Signaled the fleet to assume defensive positions around the planet. Whoever these fools are, they're about to learn why the Korthax Empire is feared throughout the galaxy. Sir, another officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the approaching fleet. Audio only, but it's on an open channel. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with a clear, professional voice speaking in heavily accented Standard Galactic. The accent was harsh, angular, completely unlike the flowing tones of most civilized species.